Part 26. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo. Chapter 251. While Muchu and Muchu were talking, the door of the shopping mall they were in was suddenly knocked open from the outside. The drone has inspected it. Is there anything wrong inside? Brother, will there be any danger if we break in so rashly? I saw a dozen burly men with unkempt hair suddenly appearing in the mall, armed with firearms. The leader, a big man with a scarred face, slapped his companion next to him on the back of the head and yelled angrily. Idiot, you know nothing. Those monsters in the city center have somehow disappeared, so hurry up and take advantage of the opportunity to collect everything you can use. As he spoke, the scar-faced man raised the butt of his gun, took the brunt of the damage and smashed the glass next to him, and then entered the store to search for resources. The companions around him were already accustomed to the bandit-like behavior of the scarred man. Instead, he followed the big man to search for food, tools, and other living resources. They are wanderers who have been living in the ruins of the city all year round, and they have already developed survival skills. In fact, with their strength, they can make a living no matter which human base they go to. But this group of desperados licking blood at the tip of their knives in the ruins have long been tired of the ordinary lives of ordinary people and the dogmatic laws and regulations of human bases. The bloody excitement like the apocalypse is what they are after. Be careful, please. Look carefully for other monsters. Don't let the boat capsize in the gutter. A dozen big men skillfully rummaged through the shelves in the shopping mall, sweeping away everything they passed like locusts passing through. After a while, the woven bags in the hands of several men were already bulging. MD, I'm really making a lot of money now. The scarred-faced man in the lead stared closely at the supplies filled with bags, his eyes full of greed. They have been keen on the supplies in this shopping mall for a long time, but they have not dared to take action because they are afraid of the zombie heretics inside. Although it is unclear how the zombie monsters entrenched in the surrounding areas disappeared. But they used drones to investigate in advance, and then they went out to search for resources with confidence. Boss, there seems to be a situation ahead. Suddenly, a subordinate beside him exclaimed. What? The scar-faced man subconsciously raised the barrel of his gun and pointed it at a certain location ahead. In a coffee shop not far from the mall, two figures could be vaguely seen through the glass. Yes, it's two humans. His grandmas, there are still people who can beat us to it. The scar-faced man shouted angrily. They were not the only homeless team in the city. Even on weekdays, in addition to avoiding zombie attacks, several teams of wanderers would also cause friction due to competing for supplies. Let's go over and see who has the guts to snatch my old scar's things. In an instant, a dozen strong men with guns and ammunition rushed into the coffee shop not far ahead like gangsters. The scar-faced man directly smashed the glass of the door, rushed in and raised his gun. Don't move, be honest. A group of men behind him also swarmed in, and in an instant, a dozen black guns were pointed at the two people in the house. The scar-faced man looked up and found that there were really only two humans inside, a man and a woman. The man was wearing a white shirt and had a handsome face. At first glance, he looked like a frail pretty boy. He was leaning against the bar with a cup of coffee. But sitting in front of the pretty girl was a beautiful woman wearing a red cheongsam. The close-fitting red cheongsam perfectly reveals her slim figure, slender waist, fair and slender thighs, and the plump outline of her chest. The gangsters stared directly at Lukinkin's figure. Gilug. I don't know who swallowed the saliva. How many years have they not met such a superb girl? Immediately afterwards, the scar-faced man at the head reacted and shouted sternly. Are you Zhang Lao-san's people or Ye Beard's people? Do you know that this is my old scar's territory? You have crossed the boundary. But her eyes still glanced in Lukinkin's direction unconsciously. Muchu picked up the cup and took a sip, turned to look at Lu Qianqian, and said with a smile. You see, beautiful women are the bane of beauty. This is an unchanging truth no matter what era it is. Lu Qianqian's eyes flashed and she pouted. That is also an incompetent vase. The scar-faced man immediately became angry when he saw Mu Qiu and the two chatting and laughing, not taking him seriously at all. He ordered to his subordinates, give me grandma's cock, hum the men to death, and keep the women. After saying that, he looked at Lu Qianqian's graceful body with evil eyes. Such a top-notch woman is rarely seen even before the end of the world. As soon as the scar-faced man finished speaking, the men next to him had already taken the lead in pulling the trigger. In an instant, gunpowder sprayed and dozens of bullets shot through the air in the direction of Mu Qiu. The eyes of the gangsters already showed abnormal joy. They could already imagine the pretty boy lying in a pool of blood after being shot all over his body. However, what they didn't expect was dozens of bullets that were 3 feet away from Mu Qiu seemed to be blocked by an invisible barrier, unable to make any progress. Clang, 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 a clear sound of bullets falling to the ground sounded. Damn it, it's the awakened one. The scar-faced man yelled angrily, but his reaction was swift. I saw veins popping out on his face, his clothes torn, his body bulging, and his figure instantly grew several times larger. This scar-faced man actually has supernatural powers. Immediately afterwards, several gangsters beside the scar-faced man also changed their bodies and were about to attack Mu Qiu and the two. Several people were faintly exuding B-level energy fluctuations, but they were all mutations that strengthened their bodies. This kind of strength is naturally not ranked among the human bases. But you can barely survive in this small border town with limited zombies. Mu Qiu took a deep breath and looked at Lu Qianqian. The latter understood immediately, and his graceful body slowly stood up, with groups of fiery red foxtails suddenly emerging from behind. This is. Several gangsters with mutated bodies were originally chasing in the direction of Mu Qiu, but when they saw the foxtails emerging behind Lu Qianqian, their expressions froze. However, it was this stunned effort. Suddenly, they heard the roars of zombies in their ears. The scar-faced man looked around in panic, only to find that in front of him were twisted zombie monsters. What's even more terrifying is that these zombies that are hungry for human flesh are actually coming towards me with their claws and fangs bared. The scar-faced man had no time to react, a killing intent flashed in his eyes, and he instantly hugged a zombie next to him, using his muscles to directly strangle the zombie in his arms. But then, several more zombies attacked him. The scar-faced man was filled with murderous intent, and he directly fought with several zombies. Just as the scar-faced man strangled the last zombie in his arms, a sharp pain suddenly came from his chest. With a loud bang, the man turned his head blankly and saw that the muzzle of a pistol behind him was still filled with gunpowder smoke. And the one holding the barrel of the gun turned out to be a bloody zombie. The scar-faced man seemed to understand something. He covered his chest with a bloody hole, pointed in one direction and slowly fell to the ground. Boring. Lu Qianqian glanced at the scarred man who fell to the ground, and her red mouth blew away the gun smoke from the muzzle. Not far from her feet, dozens of bruised corpses of gangsters were lying down. They all killed each other. Lu Qianqian threw the pistol aside and turned to look at the man in white behind her. Sir, how are you doing? After saying that, she jumped up and down next to Mu Qiu like a little girl. Mu Qiu held the coffee cup and smiled, not bad. Then how do you plan to reward me? Lu Qianqian stood on tiptoes and brought her charming body close to Mu Qiu. The plump part of her chest seemed to exude an alluring fragrance. The fire in people's bodies. Lu Qianqian's breath was like orchid in Mu Qiu's ear, her eyes were as charming as silk, and her whole body exuded an alluring charm. However, just when the atmosphere became infinitely charming, the door of the coffee shop was suddenly opened. Uncle, it seems that the gunfire came from here. A half-grown boy suddenly pushed open the door and entered. Immediately he saw a scene that made his face turn red. A young beauty stood on tiptoes, her rosy mouth resting on the ear of the man in white, and the fullness of her chest almost touched the tip of the man's nose. "Yes, sorry to bother you. Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord." Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 252. The boy's childish face immediately turned red, and he stepped back with his hands clasped together, closing the door with his backhand. Lucientian was so absorbed in the conversation that she didn't notice the sound of the person coming, and didn't react until the boy screamed. Miu had already noticed that another group of people had entered the mall, but he didn't care about it. After a while, the door of the coffee shop was opened again, and a group of people including the boy just now walked in. There were more than a dozen people in this group, men and women, dressed in different clothes, some holding guns, and some with bare hands. Miu could feel that these people were all awakened people with superpowers. And the level of superpowers was not low, generally at the level of B level and A level. The leader was a well-proportioned middle-aged man wearing an open coat. The level of this man was surprisingly S level. The man carried a simple style sword behind him, and his face had a sense of vicissitudes of life. Next to the man with the sword on his back was the young man with messy hair who had just suddenly entered. After walking into the coffee shop, the leading man with the sword on his back first looked around. He saw Miu leaning against the bar, holding a cup of coffee and wearing a white shirt, and also saw Lucientian standing next to Miu, with a slender figure and charming appearance. Then, he saw a dozen armed bandits lying in a pool of blood not far away. Tianlai Novel Network. When he saw the dozen or so bandits who died miserably, the pupils of the man with the sword on his back shrank slightly. The whole process happened in less than a few seconds. Miu also noticed the change in the eyes of the man with the sword on his back. The man with the sword on his back looked at Miu and Lucientian, and said with a fist, "Excuse me, we passed by here and wanted to search for some supplies. I don't want to disturb you too." As he said that, he signaled the boy next to him with his eyes. "Yumming, apologize to them." The young man rubbed his messy hair and bowed. "Sorry to bother you." Miu looked at the man with the sword on his back and the young man named Yumming beside him, and said, "It's okay. Don't hit a smiling person." The other party was very polite, so he naturally didn't say much. When the companions behind the man with the sword on his back saw Miu and Lucientian, they couldn't help but secretly exclaimed. The two were neatly dressed and beautiful. There was no sign of panic on their faces. They even held coffee in their hands comfortably. This beautiful dress is extremely rare in the end times. Looking back at them, they were already covered in dust and dirt after running around for many days, and they looked like savages with unkempt hair and dirty faces. Seeing that the two men seemed to have no intention of pursuing the matter, the man with the sword on his back breathed a sigh of relief and said, "In that case, let's evacuate here first and not disturb you two to rest." Miu narrowed his eyes slightly and chuckled. "Please do as you please." The man with the sword on his back nodded to Miu and the others, and then left the mall with a dozen of his men without looking back. After the group left, the bloody smell flowing from the corpses of the previous gang of bandits gradually spread in the air. Miu glanced at the dozen corpses on the ground, threw a ball of fire casually, and picked up the coffee cup. It seems that there are still smart people. As soon as the voice fell, the ball of fire flew directly to the dozen corpses on the ground. In just a few breaths, more than a dozen bandit corpses were burned to ashes by the hot flames. This group of people is a bit strange. Lucientian looked at the direction where the man with the sword on his back and his group left, Slightly puzzled, Miu smiled and shook his head. He had seen that this group of people were not like wanderers in this city. As for the purpose of this group of people, as long as they did not provoke Miu would not bother to investigate. On the other side, when the man with swords on his back and his group walked out of the mall, a man beside him was puzzled and muttered, "Brother Luo, are you so nervous? We haven't had meat for several days. We finally came across a mall." The man with swords on his back, who was called Brother Luo, had a deep expression and waved his hand. "Let's finish our mission first." Thinking of Miu and the other man he met in the mall, the man with swords on his back had a solemn look on his face. He did not find out the specific background of the man in white shirt, but he felt a threat from the beautiful woman. The woman must be an S-level strongman like him. A woman behind him suddenly said, "We found them, they are 5 kilometers away from us." As soon as these words came out, the atmosphere of the whole team instantly solidified. "Let's go." After a few minutes, the team of more than a dozen people came to a hillside in the suburbs of the city. A line of mysterious figures wearing hooded robes floated in the night below the hillside. Looking around, most of the dozens of people in the team were wearing black robes, but the two figures in the front were wearing purple robes. The man with a sword on his back stared at a deep red iron box carried by a purple-robed man below, and said, "Go, we must not let them take this thing away." As he said this, the man with the sword on his back slowly drew out the ancient sword on his back. As the sword was unsheathed, lightning flashed on the sword. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 253. At the foot of the mountain in the suburbs of the city, a human war was about to break out. The man with the sword on his back was holding an ancient heavy sword with electric sparks wrapped around the sword. He rushed into the crowd below like a horse. Then, a dozen companions behind him followed closely and joined the battle. The dozens of mysterious figures below were moving quietly in the dark moonlight. The two purple-robed men in the lead whispered, "Be careful and don't make too much noise to avoid alarming the monsters in the city." But suddenly, a huge sword came through the air with flashing lightning in the air. There was a loud bang, like a thunder explosion, and a huge deep pit was smashed in the position where many black-robed people were. The man in an open coat slowly stood up from the deep pit, still holding the ancient huge sword in his hand. The next second, almost without any hesitation, the man with the sword was in the wind. He chopped straight at the purple-robed man carrying a crimson iron box in front of the crowd. "No, stop him." The purple-robed man gave orders, and dozens of black-robed men understood and immediately took out palm-sized black boxes from their waists. They stretched out their hands and inserted the rings on their fingertips into the round hole in the middle of the black box. Instantly, a brilliant and dazzling light flashed, and smoke rose. When the dust cleared, all the black-robed men had huge weapons in their hands, either sharp knives or broad axes. There were even huge mechas emerging from the black boxes, and some black-robed men summoned ferocious beasts from the black boxes, baring their fangs and teeth to fight with the sword-wielding man and his party. In an instant, at the foot of the dim mountain, explosions sounded one after another. The alien sect members were fierce, and the sword-wielding man was obviously well prepared. The dozen people behind the sword-wielding man also took out dark iron boxes from their waists. Then the ring on the finger was inserted into the box like a key. Some black boxes flashed and turned into mecha guns, and some turned into laser barrels. The dark barrels suddenly spewed out destructive laser beams. In an instant, the hot blue laser exploded among the many black-robed people. The leading sword-wielding man was even more brave. He swung his heavy sword and cut off several black-robed people in half, and rushed straight to the two purple-robed people. The two S-level purple-robed people also surrounded the sword-wielding man in an instant. Among them, the purple-robed man with the red box on his back seemed to attach great importance to the dark red iron box behind him. He was also clumsy in the face of the sword-wielding man's attacks several times and could not exert his full strength. The sword-wielding man suddenly raised the sword in his hand, his eyes flashed fiercely, and he smashed down heavily towards another purple-robed man with great force and power. The purple-robed man was originally a strong and powerful mutant awakener, with a face like a tiger and a strong physique. However, when he felt the fierce momentum coming from the heavy sword coming towards him, he couldn't help but tremble. In an instant, the ancient heavy sword with electric arcs hit the tiger man's chest with the force of a mountain pressing down on his head. Even the latter's solid body could not withstand such a strong attack, and he flew backwards with blood spurting out of his mouth in an instant. At this moment, the roar of zombie heretics was faintly heard in the distant city. Obviously, these monsters also noticed the battle in the suburbs, and rushed towards the direction of the battle. Damn it! The purple-robed man with the red box on his back floated in the air, looking fiercely at the middle-aged man holding a heavy sword below. Then, he took out a black box from his chest and opened it. However, at the moment when he took out the black box, the sword-wielding man who was originally standing on the ground leaped up, and the heavy ancient giant sword in his hand also fell at the same time. Feeling the heavy force coming from the side, the purple-robed man subconsciously wanted to dodge. But he obviously underestimated the strength of the sword-wielding man, and saw the arc of electricity flashing on the giant sword. In an instant, the flashing arc hit the purple-robed man at a speed faster than the wind. The purple-robed man trembled, his body stopped turning, and he let out a scream. In this instant, the ancient giant sword had already smashed the purple-robed man and the red iron box behind him heavily. There was a loud bang, and the red iron box was immediately chopped to the ground by the fierce sword. Dash. A broken crack suddenly appeared on the crimson iron box, and then the broken mark spread rapidly like a spider web. No! With the shout of the purple-robed man, the crimson iron box exploded instantly. In an instant, there was a loud explosion like a stone breaking the sky, and along with the loud explosion, a dragon roar echoed in everyone's ears. A huge red dragon emerged from the crimson iron box, soaring straight up into the black sea of clouds. Roar! With the earth-shattering roar of the dragon, the originally dark night suddenly became bright as if it was struck by lightning. Is that a dragon? The daylight reflected the terrified faces of the people below. But they had no time to relieve the horror in their hearts, and the low roars of the zombie monsters came to their ears. Everyone looked in the direction of the sound, and saw countless black corpses beyond the horizon sweeping towards them. On the roof of an abandoned building in the suburbs of the city, Mu-Chiu and Lu Jianqian looked at the sky as bright as day in the distance. The sun is so bright tonight. Mu-Chiu narrowed his eyes and looked into the distance, with a smile on his lips. He could feel that a big battle was going on there. Similarly, he could also sense the sky that was as bright as day. There was a breath that made him extremely eager. Originally, Mu-Chiu was not interested in the battle between these people, but that breath made him move. Let's go, let's see what good things are waiting for us. Mu-Chiu suddenly spoke, and Lu Jianqian next to him looked over. I saw that Mu-Chiu, who was wearing a white shirt, suddenly emerged from behind him with black flames like flowing fire. A deep and dark breath gushed out, and the flames covering the back wings flowed like blood. Then, Mu-Chiu directly picked up Lu Jianqian by the waist, and the back wings fluttered and soared into the sky, and the figure disappeared in the vast sky in the blink of an eye. In less than a moment, Mu-Chiu brought Lu Jianqian to a lake on the other side of the city. Mu-Chiu slowly put Lu Jianqian down beside the lake. The latter looked at the silent and dark night sky, then looked at the calm lake in front of him, and looked at Mu-Chiu with puzzled eyes. The evening breeze was cool, blowing through the hair on Mu-Chiu's forehead. Mu-Chiu put his finger to his mouth, made a gesture of silence, and raised the corner of his mouth. "Shh, it's coming." As soon as the voice fell, the sky sounded like thunder, and the originally dark night sky suddenly became as bright as day. The wind and clouds were strange, and at the other end of the changing sky, a giant dragon with a length of dozens of feet, a red body, and a majestic momentum emerged from the sky. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 254. The roar of a giant dragon came to her ears, and Lu Qianqian widened her eyes in disbelief. How is it possible? This is a dragon. A real dragon. Lu Qianqian always thought that real dragons only existed in myths and legends. Even though she had seen a lot in the end times, she had never seen a real dragon. But when she really saw this kind of divine beast, she instinctively felt a tremor from the depths of her soul. This has nothing to do with oppression in terms of level, but the instinct of fear of higher beings from the depths of her blood. The giant dragon, which was dozens of feet long, pushed aside the clouds and mist, and saw that its whole body was red, its fangs were fierce, its mane was fluttering, and there was even a closed vertical pupil between its eyebrows. Mu Qiu, who was standing next to Lu Qianqian, also felt the powerful power of the behemoth in front of him. The beast souls of the netherworld evil tiger and the three-legged golden crow in his body even felt the threat and became irritable and uneasy. The real dragon might was right in front of him, but Mu Qiu laughed out loud. I didn't expect to get an unexpected reward this time. He could feel that the blood of the strange beast in front of him was purer than all the strange beasts he had devoured before. Then, Mu Qiu's back wings fluttered, and he stood directly in the air, with rolling black flames of fire around him. The supreme pressure of the corpse king mixed with the dragon soul of the holy master in his body burst out. In an instant, the overwhelming might confronted the red dragon in the sky. The red dragon didn't care about the two ants by the lake at first, but when it felt the terrifying pressure released by Mu Qiu head-on. The red dragon's pupils suddenly trembled. In that pressure, it actually felt the dragon's might. Roar. The red dragon let out a long roar, and then the vertical pupils that were tightly closed at the center of its eyebrows suddenly opened. In an instant, time and space were overturned, and the world changed drastically. Standing by the lake, Lu Qianqian suddenly felt that the surrounding space had undergone drastic changes. The lake surface is still the same lake surface, and the sky is still as bright as day, but the surrounding space is shielded and the airflow is stagnant. They seem to be in a divided space-time domain. It's like an illusion, but it's not. The next moment, the vertical pupil at the center of the red dragon's eyebrows closed, and when it opened again, there was a violent rainstorm in the sky, and the wind was strong. The sky as bright as day turned into a long night again in an instant. The season of late autumn turned into winter in an instant, and the temperature in the air dropped sharply. Then, the momentum of the red dragon's body increased several times in an instant, and the originally huge body grew rapidly, covering the sky and the sun. With a long roar from the red dragon, the huge body rushed towards the figure standing in the air. Mu Qiu's mouth drew a crazy smile, and the rolling black flames gradually condensed into a huge and fierce black dragon circling around the body. Roar. The wind and clouds were changing, and above the deep sky, a ferocious red dragon with fangs and vertical pupils, and a red body, collided with a black dragon with red eyes and a body made of flames. The meeting of two dragons. In an instant, the sky and the earth were in a strange state. Dark clouds rolled, thunder roared, and flames rose. The sky was instantly occupied by red and black colors, and the sound of dragon roars was endless. Lu Qianqian below stared at the scene in front of her eyes that was enough to shock the world, her rosy little mouth slightly opened, and she was slow to speak. After a short moment, the space where the world was located seemed unable to withstand the fierce collision of the two dragons. A series of spatial cracks appeared on the edge of the sky. The fierce fight between the two dragons in the sky soon ended. The black dragon rolled back to Mewtwo and spread into rolling black flames again. The red dragon in the sky was also covered with scars, its body was charred, its pupils were trembling, and it was consuming a lot of energy. At this time, Mewtwo obviously didn't want to get entangled with it anymore. He just stood in the air and stretched out his hand. Flame Demon. An endless sea of fire suddenly erupted behind Mewtwo, and a huge body that could support the sky surged out of the sea of fire. A destructive level Flame Demon Lord. Then, Lucian, who was standing by the lake, saw a scene that looked like a miracle. The Flame Demon Giant that could support the sky was fighting with the red dragon in the sky. During the whole process, the vertical pupil at the center of the red dragon's eyebrows kept opening and closing, and in the process of the vertical pupil opening and closing, the surrounding environment was constantly changing. The lake began to freeze, the leaves turned yellow, the flowers and plants began to bloom, and the air became hot. Even the scene in the sky kept changing between day and night. Spring, summer, autumn, and winter, 4 seasons, sun and moon. Lucian seemed to understand something, and murmured. The god of Zhongshan, named Zuyan, sees as day, closes as night, blows as winter, exhales as summer, does not drink, does not eat, does not rest, and his breath is wind. His body is 1,000 miles long. This is Zilong. Mewtwo stared at the red dragon in the sky. As its vertical pupils manipulated the surrounding space to change, the energy gushing out of its body became more and more powerful. But this alone is not enough. Mewtwo waved his hand, and a large area of black flames suddenly emerged around the sky supporting Flame Demon Giant. The raging black flames that filled the entire space instantly enveloped Zilong. It was as if an invisible hand bound it tightly, and no matter how Zilong struggled, it could not escape the imprisonment of the black flames. Then, the Flame Demon Giant roared, and the broad arms wrapped in black flames directly clamped the neck under the head of Zilong. As the black flames of the karmic fire from the netherworld burned, the wailing sound from Zilong's mouth continued to weaken. In an instant, Zilong's huge body faded away step by step, and the strange phenomena in the surrounding space gradually returned to normal. Lucian clearly saw a red dragon soul flashing in the broken dragon body, all of which poured into Mewtwo's body below. As the dragon soul entered the body, Mewtwo's body was suddenly wrapped in layers of deep red flames like a cocoon. The flame cocoon beat slowly like a heart, as if it was nurturing some kind of new life. And Mewtwo, who was in the flame cocoon, also felt the changes in his body. When the Zilong soul entered the body, it immediately struggled wildly in the body. After that, the dragon soul was suppressed by the more violent energy in Mewtwo's body in an instant. The vigorous devouring power was running in his body, and the candle dragon soul was also being transformed by the devouring power at a speed visible to the naked eye. What Mewtwo didn't expect was that the candle dragon's blood contained a powerful energy that he had never seen before. With the influx of this energy, a barrier somewhere in his body seemed to have a trace of shattering. He vaguely felt that his body had also undergone some indescribable changes. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 255. This is Lucian, wearing a red cheongsam, stood by the lake, looking up at the vision wrapped in fire on the horizon, opening her seductive red lips, her expression full of surprise. I saw that the position on the horizon where Mewtwo was originally had been shrouded in a dark red fire cloud. Mewtwo was wrapped in layers of red flames and turned into a cocoon. What surprised Lucian even more was that in her eyes, the cocoon of flames hovering in the sky began to beat violently like a heart. Vessel-like patterns began to appear on the cocoon made of flames, and the whole thing looked like a living heart that was still beating. After running for an unknown number of days, suddenly, the flaming cocoon wrapping Mewtwo in the sky suddenly fell towards the lake. There was just a loud popping sound, and the flame cocoon instantly sank into the lake like a falling meteorite. Immediately afterwards, the originally calm ice surface began to boil violently, and the rising heat waves rippled in the air, creating layers of ripples visible to the naked eye. The deep red color like blood began to spread rapidly at the bottom of the lake, and in just a few breaths, the entire lake turned crimson. Lu Qianqian looked intently and realized that the lake water had become as hot as lava. After a while, the sound of a heart beating suddenly came from the bottom of the lake. Boom! Dong dong dong! The sound of heart beating gradually became more rapid. Finally, at a certain moment, as if a bottleneck was broken, a loud noise came from the depths of the lake. Just hearing a boom, a turbine-like siphon appeared on the lake surface, and the entire lake surface composed of magma began to decline at a speed visible to the naked eye. The turbulent lake finally turned into a small river less than 1 meter deep, and a figure appeared in the center of the lake bottom. Lu Qianqian's eyes were focused and she looked towards the figure by the lake. In the center of the lake stood a handsome man she had never seen before. The man's long dark red hair spread down to his waist, and his hair was as smooth and soft as fine silk. The bridge of the nose is straight, a faint smile always hangs on the thin corners of the lips, and the deep red eyes reveal indifference to the world. There is an indescribable nobility and evil charm in his every move, as if he is looked down upon the gods of the world. While Lu Qianqian was in a daze looking at the man's beautiful face, the man in the lake also turned to look at her. Their eyes looked at each other, and the corners of the red-haired man's mouth were slightly raised. With just one glance, Lu Qianqian's soul seemed to be sucked away, and her eyes fell into a void for an instant. Lu Qianqian's whole body seemed to be in a field of deep red fire, and the surrounding flames spread rapidly throughout her body until she was completely swallowed up. A few breaths passed before Lu Qianqian suddenly woke up. Unconsciously, her back was soaked in cold sweat. It's unimaginable that just by looking at each other, she, an S-class awakened person, would be trapped in it. You must know that Lu Qianqian's best field is the soul level of illusion. Although it only lasts for a few breaths, it is enough to cause fatal consequences among experts. What a terrible smell! The corners of Lu Qianqian's red lips opened and closed slightly, and her voice was vibrating when she spoke. Without him, the handsome man in front of her would put too much pressure on Lu Qianqian. Lu Qianqian felt as small as an ant in front of him. That invisible sense of oppression almost broke her mind. It was hard for her to imagine that such a godlike method would be so vividly displayed on this red-haired man. The red-haired man in the lake stood up slowly with a smile in his eyes. As he stood up, his strong chest slowly rose from the lake, gradually revealing his slender and tall figure. And the lake made of magma beneath him quickly gathered on the red-haired man at this moment. In an instant, countless magma gradually condensed into a set of personal-fitting fiery red armor. I saw that the whole body of this armor was covered with engraved lines, and the fitting part of the upper body was more like a robe. A blood-colored gemstone on the chest shone with a strange luster. Her long dark red hair spread to her waist, and her whole body was wrapped with silky black flames. After putting on this blood-red armor, the man's evil temperament became even more apparent, adding a bit of chilling domineeringness to him. Lu Qianqian stared blankly at the red-haired man wearing blood-red armor walking slowly. As he moved, the bloody gem on his chest suddenly cracked open. Only then did Lu Qianqian realize what kind of gem this was. It was clearly a blood-red ferocious vertical pupil. At the moment when this vertical pupil opened, the world seemed to be filled with a chilling atmosphere. As the red-haired man walked, the surrounding environment began to change. The originally cold late autumn turned out to be as hot as summer, and the sky became as bright as day. The four seasons are out of order, and time and space are changing. The red-haired man raised his head slightly, then stretched out his right hand and opened and closed the corners of his mouth. Yanjai. Return to darkness. He clenched his right fist, and the originally daytime sky turned into a deep night in an instant. Such power is already like a god. Mute you, master. Seeing the red-haired man in blood-red armor getting closer and closer to her, Lu Qianqian spoke subconsciously, her tone trembling. Both the appearance and this weird ability made Lu Qianqian feel extremely strange. But only the calm smile at the corner of her mouth seemed to see through everything, giving Lu Qianqian a familiar feeling. Sir, what do you look like? Mu Qiu paused slightly, and the ice mist condensed into a mirror in front of her, revealing a handsome face she had never seen before. Mu Qiu knew that the person in the mirror was himself. Since absorbing the candle dragon, the blood energy in his body has been further condensed and consolidated. He vaguely felt that the power in his body was about to break through to another realm he had never entered before. That is a level above the destruction level. This power. With swaying red hair, Mu Qiu spread her palms and stared down at the blood-red armor on her body. After transforming into this form, his strength in all aspects has increased several times. Candle Dragon Armor. Even Mu Qiu didn't expect that he would change so much after swallowing the Candle Dragon. It's really Master Mu Qiu. When she learned the identity of the red-haired man, Lu Qianqian's eyes lit up with excitement and she almost threw herself into Mu Qiu's arms. It is different from Shui, who brought domineering arrogance to the world during the Shura period. Today's Mu Qiu is not only handsome and charming in appearance, but also has a layer of evil mystery in her temperament. Mu Qiu smiled and shook his head. Although this form significantly improved his strength, the amount of energy consumed was unimaginable. As soon as she thought about it, a dragon roar suddenly came from Mu Qiu's body. Mu Qiu's whole body was once again wrapped in a layer of flame cocoon, which suddenly exploded like a ball of water. Mu Qiu, who reappeared this time, had returned to her original appearance. I didn't expect that I would get such a big harvest this time. It seems that they really gave me a big gift. Looking at the dim night sky, Mu Qiu couldn't help but sigh. Today, he has not truly surpassed the realm of destruction, but Mu Qiu has faintly touched that barrier. There is only one opportunity left for him to break through that bottleneck and reach a realm above the destruction level. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world. Start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord. Author, Mo. Chapter 256. Under the dim night, a fierce battle took place in the ruins of a city. Flames shot up into the sky, and hot laser beams shot and exploded at the corners of the city. The originally fragile and weathered buildings were instantly destroyed by these laser cannons. The ground was already covered with the remains of zombie monsters, and some corpses had even become charred and could not be distinguished from human figures. It was hard to imagine what kind of fierce battle had taken place here before. There was a loud sound of heavy stomping of machines on the street, followed by several figures fleeing from the corner of the street to the distance. Swish, swish, swish. There was another burst of laser sounds, and dozens of tall mechas spewed tail flames under their feet, chasing these fleeing figures. These mechas were well equipped, with hard shells, and held a bunch of laser guns in their hands, running rampant throughout the city. On the other hand, the humans who were being hunted were all injured, and each of them had varying degrees of injuries. Behind them was a scorching laser beam, and they fled in the city like street rats. Yumming, be careful. At this time, a cry of surprise came from the side. A young man with messy hair turned back in panic, only to find that several lasers were shooting at his back. The young man hurriedly fell to the ground and rolled several times in succession, and only then did he narrowly escape this fatal attack. The remaining humans fled on the street, and the zombies along the way were often shot into sieves by the indiscriminate laser attacks before they launched an attack. In less than a moment, several more people fell under the pursuit of the tall mecha. Damn it, their reinforcements are getting more and more. No one thought that there would be enemy help in this ruined city. Before they completed the mission and successfully retreated, a large number of zombies followed the sound and blocked their way. In addition, the reinforcements of the heterogeneous cult arrived, and their team of only a dozen people was quickly dispersed. The leading sword-wielding man was dragged away by several purple-robed men and disappeared. "Bastards, fight them." A strong man finally couldn't suppress his anger, stopped and took out an iron box from his waist. He held the iron box and stretched out his right hand, with the ring flashing yellow light on his fingertips. He was about to insert the ring into the box, but a laser cannon came from a distance. There was a loud bang, and the place where the strong man was had been bombed into a charred deep pit, with blood and flesh blurred and no human figure could be seen. The iron black box was bounced aside in the explosion. "Old Black." The remaining companions let out a painful cry, but the surroundings were already full of tall humanoid mechas. Dozens of mechas surrounded several humans, and the hot laser cannons were aimed at their flesh and blood. It seemed that in the next second, they would spit out flames to annihilate these humans into scum. But then, a cold mechanical voice came out from these mechas. "Ding! Warning, put down your weapons, otherwise we will take annihilation measures." These tall combat mechas are actually robots controlled by machines. The few remaining humans looked at each other, blood was still flowing all over their bodies, but their faces were full of determination. However, at this moment, two figures slowly walked over from the distance of the street. The sensors of many robots sensed human figures and turned their heads to look. On the corner of the street, a man and a woman were seen walking. The woman was beautiful and the man was handsome. "It's them." The young man with messy hair recognized the people at a glance as the mysterious man and woman they met in the mall before. No mark was identified, it was determined to be a human traitor, and the destruction order was issued. Suddenly, several robots raised laser guns and launched a fierce attack on the man and woman in front. Facing the overwhelming laser sweep, the charming woman with a voluptuous figure smiled. She took a step forward, and a cluster of fiery red foxtails appeared behind her. Several fluffy foxtails made of supernatural energy stood in front of the two people to form a barrier, and all the laser beams that hit the two were bounced back. In an instant, dozens of robots were hit by the ejected laser shells before they could react, and exploded into a pile of parts. Good opportunity. Seeing this, several surrounded humans quickly took out their weapons and used their supernatural powers to engage in a fierce battle with the surrounding robot army. At this time, dozens of robots also gave up the order to capture them alive, and instead launched another round of more fierce offensive with a killing momentum. During this period, the two men and women who suddenly appeared became the focus of the robot army's attack, and the blue laser beams in the sky hit like a rain curtain. But the woman who turned into a fox demon was even more powerful. She blocked all the attacks with her overwhelming force and blew up several humanoid mechas that rushed to the front. Mu-Chiu and Lu Qianqian suddenly appeared on the battlefield. Lu Qianqian was fighting with a group of mechas in a relaxed and comfortable manner, while Mu-Chiu took advantage of the gap and slowly walked to the other side. There was a palm-sized black box scattered on the ground. Next to the iron box fell a ring, which was still flashing a light yellow light. Mu-Chiu picked up the blood-stained iron box on the ground and looked at the ring next to it. The ring is inlaid with a yellow crystal core the size of a fingernail, which faintly emits strands of strange energy. This is actually a B-level energy crystal core. Mu-Chiu seemed to have thought of something, and suddenly inserted the ring into the groove on one side of the iron box in his hand. In an instant, the iron box opened, and a dazzling strong light flashed. A beam of light flashed through the iron box, and when the light dissipated, a laser cannon had appeared in Mu-Chiu's hand. Mu-Chiu was thoughtful, and a smile appeared on his face. He carried the machine gun on his shoulder and aimed at several tall mechas that spewed bullets in the distance. Gently pulled the trigger, and suddenly a huge laser-heavy cannon was released from Mu-Chiu's shoulder. In an instant, the positions where several mechas were located issued a series of deafening explosions like tinnitus. Looking again, several mechas have completely turned into ashes and disappeared on the spot. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 257. This little thing is quite interesting. Miu played with the palm-sized iron black box in her hand with great interest. He could sense it, just like the space storage group in Yuhei base before. This small black box also has a built-in storage space. But unlike the former, this black box seems to be locked and requires a specific key to open it. The corresponding keys are the rings made of energy crystal nuclei worn by these people. Just as Miu was looking at it, another tall mecha was slashing in front of him with a giant blade. In response to the fierce attack in front of her, Miu only moved her feet slightly, and her figure just dodged the attack in a flash. Then Miu turned sideways and pulled the trigger of the laser cannon on her shoulder again. A huge laser beam spurted out from the barrel, and a deafening explosion sounded next to Miu. At the same time, the battle ahead was coming to an end. The dozen or so robots that rushed towards Lu Qianqian were all destroyed into a pile of scrap metal. Although the dozens of robots fighting the fleeing human team were also partially damaged. However, the human side was already seriously injured, and they were already exhausted from running away all the way. They were about to be surrounded and defeated by an army of robots. At the critical moment, an ancient giant sword flashing with electric arcs came through the air with the power of Mount Tai. With a loud bang, the heavy sword instantly crushed several tall mechas. A deep pit was smashed into the ground, and rubble flew everywhere. Several people followed the sound and saw a familiar figure wearing an open coat flying through the air. Uncle! Brother Luo! Several people were originally surrounded by dozens of robots and had fallen into despair, but when they saw the middle-aged man coming through the air, their faces immediately showed a look of joy. The middle-aged man called Brother Luo pulled out the ancient black iron heavy sword from the ground and stood in front of everyone. He first looked back at Miu and Lu Qianqian, then turned around and swung his sword to attack the dozens of tall mechas in front of him. I saw the man holding a dark iron heavy sword, but its power was extremely astonishing. I don't know what kind of metal this heavy sword is made of. It is extremely strong. Those laser bullets hitting the broadsword body are unable to break even an inch. And when the man slashed at those mechas with his sword, the strength of the blessing on the heavy sword suddenly increased several times, creating a critical force, and the wind howled. Under the overwhelming force, even those tall machines made of special metals were instantly turned into scrap metal. In just a few breaths, the sound of mechas exploding was heard everywhere, and dozens of mechas had been destroyed by the middle-aged man with his sword. The seemingly extremely heavy sword turned out to be nothing in the man's hands, and the light blue figure was as light as a goose feather. In the blink of an eye, several more mechas exploded into a pile of scrap metal. The violent explosions of many robots even caused the surrounding houses to collapse. Uncle is so strong. The few remaining humans stood in the distance, looking shocked as they watched the middle-aged man holding a heavy sword destroy and chop down the robots one after another. The half-grown boy with messy hair jumped up and cheered, his eyes shining with admiration. Miu looked at the middle-aged man with a playful look on his face. What he was more interested in was this man's abilities. To be able to develop this kind of superpower to such a level, this man is quite a talent. Just as the sword-wielding man was fighting a fierce battle with an army of robots, a mecha rushed out from the side and attacked directly behind Lu Qianqian. Careful! At the critical moment, a woman's exclamation came from the remaining team. Lu Qianqian felt the howling wind behind her, and several fiery red foxtails composed of strange energy swaying behind her. A ball of rose-red mist swayed away, and the whole person disappeared instantly. The next second, a beam of laser shot through the air, directly piercing the ground where Lu Qianqian was. The robot hit the air with one strike and turned its attention to the few remaining team members not far ahead. The mechanical foot made of special metal spewed flames from its tail, and in a few breaths it was speeding towards the direction of the people. With laser fire all over the sky, they were unable to resist with scars all over their bodies. A woman in the team closed her eyes subconsciously. Suddenly, there was a loud explosion in her ears. The woman opened her eyes and saw the hot and charming Lu Qianqian standing in front of her. "Thank you for the reminder, little sister. But don't forget, keeping yourself safe is the most important thing." Lu Qianqian turned around, licked her red lips, and winked at the woman behind her. For some reason, the woman's cheeks turned slightly red and she lowered her head instantly. Several companions beside him also looked at Lu Qianqian with shocked eyes. Just like their captain, a dangerous high-tech robot was eliminated in a matter of seconds. This woman is so strong. At the same time, the battle between a man holding a sword and an army of robots in the distance came to an end. The surrounding houses were shaken and collapsed inch by inch under the aftermath of the mechanical explosion, and the ground was sunken. The man in a light cyan coat pulled out the dark iron heavy sword from the chest of a scrapped robot. A pile of scrap metal had fallen beneath his feet. The sword-wielding man carried the dark iron heavy sword behind his back and walked towards the crowd. As the man approached, everyone saw that the middle-aged man's shoulders and abdomen had been opened with blood-colored holes, and blood was still flowing from them. "Uncle! Brother Luo, are you okay?" The middle-aged man waved his hand, coughed twice and then gasped. "I didn't expect the reinforcements from the other side to come so quickly. It was indeed my fault this time." As he said that, the middle-aged man walked towards Mu Qiu and the two people not far ahead. With a smile on his face, he stretched out his hand and said, "Friends, we meet again." Mu Qiu smiled and nodded meaningfully. "Yeah, what a coincidence." In a corner of the city under the night sky, a bonfire rose along the dark corner, lighting up the dim night sky. There were several human figures sitting around a campfire. These were the surviving humans from the hunted team. Due to previous battles, all the zombies near the outskirts of the city had been wiped out. In a short period of time, they are not afraid of these zombies looking for bonfires to attack. An iron rack was placed next to the flame, and emergency food such as canned bread was baked on the iron rack. Wisps of aroma flowed down the air into everyone's noses, like seductive jade hands touching their taste buds. The wild-haired boy on the side stared straight at the food on the iron rack, with saliva dripping from the corner of his mouth. "Thank you both for your help. I'm Luo Ziyuan, the Super Awakener. These are my team members." The powerful man carrying a sword sat cross-legged by the fire and took the lead in introducing. Mu Qiu raised the corners of her mouth, pointed at Lu Qianqian and said with a squinted smile, "This is Lu Qianqian, a mutant awakener. As you can see, she is very powerful." After hearing Mu Qiu praising her strength, Lu Qianqian immediately raised her mouth in joy. But immediately after, Mu Qiu's other words made Lu Qianqian stunned. "My name is Qiu Mu. As you can see, I am just an ordinary awakened healer. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the Flame Demon Lord." Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 258. "What, don't you believe it?" Seeing the slightly frozen expressions on everyone's faces, Mu Qiu took the hand of Lu Qianqian, who was also looking stunned. A burnt black scar appeared on the hand that was originally as white and flawless as soft as suet jade. This was caused by Lu Qianqian being accidentally hit by a laser when fighting those mechas. Mu Qiu touched the scar on the back of Lu Qianqian's hand, and a white halo blew by like a breeze. In just a few breaths of time, the burnt black scar the size of a bottle cap healed as before at a speed visible to the naked eye in front of everyone's eyes. There are no traces of injury even visible from the outside. "Okay, great." The wild-haired boy stared blankly at Mu Qiu's magical doctor-like methods and couldn't help but admire him. However, Luo Ziyuan noticed the slightly astonished look on Lu Qinqin's side and asked tentatively. What's the relationship between the two of you? Judging from the previous situations, the man in front of me was the leader. Mu Qiu held Lu Qinqin's silky jade hand and said with a smile. Brother and sister, we are brother and sister. At this time, Lu Qianqian also reacted and looked at Mu Qiu and said shyly. Brother. The soft words combined with his charming appearance immediately made the faces of the elders sitting there blush. Mu Qiu joked, why do you seem a little confused? Luo Ziyuan coughed lightly, and a layer of bandage was already wrapped on his shoulder. To tell you the truth, with your strength, you two don't look like wanderers wandering around in the ruins of the city. We were a little wary when we met in the mall last time, so I hope you can bear with me. Mu Qiu replied, actually, we are indeed not wanderers in this city. Xianji looked up at the sky and said with emotion. Actually, the two of us, brother and sister, are from the Dongshan base hundreds of kilometers away. However, we were attacked by a zombie wave a few months ago. Our base fell to the zombie wave. Mu Qiu's eyes flickered and she looked deeply at the sky, seeming to be trapped in painful memories. Lu Qianqian on the side also frowned, looking at Mu Qiu with empty eyes. She really didn't expect that the lord of a city in front of her with incredible strength would lie so naturally, without even making a draft. After hearing Mu Qiu mention the sad things, the people sitting around the campfire also looked downcast. Things harm their own kind, and as humans, they also cannot bear to hear the news that their fellow humans have fallen under the claws of zombies. Friends, my condolences. Luo Ziyuan patted Mu Qiu on the shoulder to express comfort. Mu Qiu suddenly said, I don't think Brother Luo and his party look like wanderers in the ruins. Could it be that they are from a nearby human base? As soon as he finished speaking, Mu Qiu stared at Luo Ziyuan. This is his true purpose. He had little interest in Luo Ziyuan and his party, but what really interested him was the origin of the candle dragon. Upon hearing Mu Qiu's question, several people's expressions suddenly became a little strange. After a few breaths, Luo Ziyuan said vaguely, to be honest with what Brother Qiu Mu said, our team is from Zilan base. Zilan base. Very good. Mu Qiu's face immediately showed joy. We, brother and sister, had planned to go to the Zilan base this time to look for our cousin and make a living there by the way. As soon as these words came out, Mu Qiu found that the expressions of the people in front of him suddenly shook, and they fell into a long silence. Only the young man with messy hair looked at Luo Ziyuan worriedly. Uncle, why don't we take Brother Qiu and the others with us? There are no marks on them. It's too dangerous to go there like this, Mu Qiu was not worried about everyone's anomaly, but had a look of confusion on her face. Luo Ziyuan thought for a moment and said slowly, Brother Qiu, do you really plan to go to Zilan base? Mu Qiu was keenly aware that when these people mentioned Zilan base, the expressions on their faces were quite strange. That look was filled with fear and a bit of hatred, but they themselves came from the Zilan base. What, Brother Luo, aren't you from Zilan base? It's a long story. Luo Ziyuan's expression also became emotional. Today's Zilan base is no longer the future base that countless people envisioned at the beginning. I don't know since when, Zilan base divided human beings into 3, 6, or 9 levels according to awakened people and ordinary people. Awakened people enjoy different treatment according to different talent levels, while ordinary humans have become the eliminated ones abandoned by the times, with a low status that is worse than that of machines. In the current Zilan base, ordinary humans have become like rats in the sewers, suppressed and enslaved by many awakened nobles, and even captured like white rats for cruel human experiments. All humans in the base are racially imprinted. With that said, Luo Ziyuan opened his sleeves and saw a circular red mark engraved on his arm. Several other people also opened their sleeves, and they were all engraved with dark red patterns like Luo Ziyuan. This symbol represents rebellion and heresy at Zilan base. After hearing Luo Ziyuan's explanation, Mu Qiu seemed to understand something. So your organization is invisible in Zilan base? Luo Ziyuan nodded and said firmly. The inhumane brutality of Zilan base was soon resisted by some humans, including a group of awakened people and ordinary people, forming an alliance. We call ourselves, the Resistance Army. If you, Brother Qiu, arrive at Zilan base, you will also be marked with racial marks, and the awakened people from outside will be arranged to undergo a series of genetic experiments first. That means you will lose your freedom and privacy, and will always be under the surveillance and control of the top leaders. Mu Qiu didn't expect that this Zilan base would actually stage such a drama. Luo Ziyuan looked at Mu Qiu. Brother Qiu, are you still going to Zilan base now? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Sign in at the end of the world. Start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, Mo. Chapter 259. Are you still going to Zilan base now? Luo Ziyuan looked at Mu Qiu and Lu Qianqian, as if trying to read some clues from their faces. But to his disappointment, Mu Qiu smiled slightly and said, if this Zilan base is really as dangerous as Brother Luo said, then we should go take a look. After all, our cousin is still in misery. The wild-haired boy looked at Mu Qiu's sincere face and couldn't bear it. He turned to look at Luo Ziyuan and said, Uncle, let's help Brother Qiu and the others. Without racial markers, they can't enter the base. Luo Ziyuan did not agree immediately. Instead, after thinking for a moment, he looked at Mu Qiu and said, Brother Qiu, if you don't mind, you can follow us back to the base. As for your cousin, I can ask the organization to help you investigate and then make plans. With that said, Luo Ziyuan handed a skewer of barbecue on the iron rack to Mu Qiu. Mu Qiu took the barbecue and said with a smile, in that case, I'll trouble you all. With that said, he picked up the meat skewers and took a bite. Seeing this, Luo Ziyuan felt a little relieved. Being able to eat the food he delivered so easily was indeed not something that someone who had been living in the ruins all year round could do. People in the ruins are sinister, and even the food given out may be poisonous, so vigilant wanderers will never accept food from others easily. How did Luo Ziyuan know that Mu Qiu, who had swallowed a destructive poison like the masked poison moth, was already invulnerable to a certain extent? Moreover, even if there is deadly poison in the food, it will be completely absorbed by the devouring blood the moment it invades his body, and it will not pose any threat to him. A simple conversation ended just like that during dinner. Both parties have learned some information about the other party, but they also clearly know that the other party is hiding something. Mu Qiu knew that Luo Ziyuan and his party did not tell them the purpose of their trip, but he could guess that it must be related to the Candle Dragon. Luo Ziyuan and his group also expressed doubts about the whereabouts of Mu Qiu and the others. They were all smart enough not to ask any further questions. After all, in this apocalyptic world, there are too many people with ulterior secrets. It was already dark, the rising bonfire was extinguished, and everyone set up a large tent in the countryside. The resistance army led by Luo Ziyuan also thoughtfully prepared a small tent for Mu Qiu and Lu Qianqian, which was set up not far from them. Before leaving, they left the two of them with meaningful smiles. They have seen a lot of role-playing games in this end of the world, such as brother and sister, sister and brother. Mu Qiu and Lu Qianqian have different surnames, so in the eyes of some people, they naturally seem to be playing some sexy trick. In the huge and spacious tent, Luo Ziyuan and his party were talking quietly. The faint candlelight illuminated everyone's face, and they were exhausted physically and mentally after several battles. Is this all we have left? Luo Ziyuan looked around and found that the original team of more than a dozen people now only had 7 people left, including him. A dozen middle and high-class awakened people were lost in one fell swoop. Such a loss was not unimportant to their resistance forces. This action was a mistake in my judgment, and I feel sorry for everyone. Luo Ziyuan sighed. His tone was low, but his face was a little pale. He didn't expect the opponent's reinforcements to arrive so quickly, and even he himself was held back by 3 S-class awakeners. At the cost of being seriously injured, he escaped from the siege. Brother Luo, I can't blame you for this matter. At least we have completed the task. The woman on the side spoke to comfort him. Yes, uncle, who would have thought that there is such a big thing in their box, The messy-haired boy gestured with his hands and exclaimed. But before he could scream, a strong man next to him tightly covered his mouth. The strong man glanced in the direction of the tent where Muqiu and the others were, and whispered. Brother Luo, can you believe those 2 people? No wonder the strong man was so suspicious. The time and place when Muqiu appeared were too coincidental. If the enemy is really an undercover agent sent by the enemy to catch a big fish, then they are just inviting the wolf into the house. Luo Ziyuan looked at the only woman in the team. Axing, are you sure there are no marks on them? The delicate woman named Asin nodded. It's certain that they were not racially imprinted. After hesitating for a moment, the woman finally spoke. I don't think the 2 of them talk like bad people, and that Lu Qianqian is also very powerful. Such a person should not risk his life to come to our side personally. As soon as the words fell, the tent fell into silence again. The wild-haired boy rubbed his fluffy head and said with a silly smile. I feel that Brother Qiu and the others should be good people. Yuming, don't make trouble. Someone reminded me. Luo Ziyuan suddenly said. It's still some time before we return to the base. Let's observe for a while. He had already made plans for this matter. If Muqiu and the 2 are really spies sent by the enemy, then they can take this opportunity to find out the enemy's further plans. When necessary, false information can even be thrown out to mislead the enemy. If Muqiu and his partner really wanted to go to Zilan base to look for their relatives, then they could just use this opportunity to help and win them over. After all, he saw Lu Qianqian's powerful strength, and Muqiu's healing ability was quite rare. In fact, there were only a limited number of truly awakened people in their resistance army, and most of them were transformed mutants. If they could win over Muqiu and his partner, it would be a pleasant surprise for this trip. Luo Ziyuan looked at the tent with the candlelight extinguished, his eyes deep. Lord Muqiu. Lu Qianqian's charming voice moved Muqiu's side away from the side. With his ability, he naturally heard the conversation between Luo Ziyuan and his team. It seems that the other party has concealed a lot of information. Muqiu looked at his side, and saw that the little fox had been lying in the quilt without knowing when. The soft quilt cover reveals her exquisite figure, with her shoulders half exposed. She looks at Muqiu with seductive eyes, and her rosy lips open and close gently. I have warmed the bed for you, it's time to go to bed. If Lu Qianqian was born in ancient times, she would definitely be a demon concubine who brings disaster to the country and the people. Muqiu raised the corner of his mouth and pinched Lu Qianqian's smooth face. Go to bed. Sign in at the end of the world, start by devouring the flame demon lord. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 260. In a suburb near the city border, a team of about 10 people was walking slowly towards the distance. Now Muqiu and his team have been following Luo Ziyuan's team for 2 days. During this period, they did not encounter any robot army, but killed many zombie monsters on the edge of the city. With Luo Ziyuan and his team acting as bodyguards, Muqiu and his team were happy to be free. Luo Ziyuan took the lead and walked in front. He looked back at his companions who were showing signs of fatigue and said, "Everyone hold on for a while, we will soon be out of the city." At this time, They had walked more than 10 kilometers on foot. Because they were worried about the enemy's search, they gave up using transportation and walked instead. As soon as the voice fell, the ground where Luo Ziyuan was suddenly trembled. Then the ground appeared with cracks like spider webs. A huge centipede monster with a hideous mouth rushed out from deep underground. Luo Ziyuan's figure flashed and pulled out the ancient style of the black iron heavy sword on his back. I saw a flash of energy on his body, and the heavy black iron sword was suddenly surrounded by arcs of electricity. Luo Ziyuan swung the heavy black iron sword and smashed it at the giant centipede that suddenly appeared like a mountain. There was a loud bang, and the earth was smashed into a deep pit. And the giant centipede with a body length of several meters was split into two halves from the limbs in an instant. Dark green body fluids splashed out, and the walls of the surrounding houses were instantly corroded with large holes. The whole process happened in just a few breaths, and it was thrilling and exciting. But the companions behind Luo Ziyuan seemed to be accustomed to it. Except for the surprise of the sudden appearance of the centipede at the beginning, there was no other reaction. It can be seen that they trust Luo Ziyuan's strength. A strong man stepped forward and skillfully dug out a light blue crystal core from the body of the giant centipede. Mu Qiu was amazed when he saw Luo Ziyuan destroy the giant centipede with a few swings. Luo Ziyuan had just used his superpowers, which made Mu Qiu feel quite interesting. After he exerted his power, the heavy sword on his back pressed down on the monster with a force of 1,000 pounds. It was a real force of 1,000 pounds, a way to break all laws with force. The superpower that can attach gravity to objects, combined with Luo Ziyuan's unparalleled fighting skills, doubled his strength. Even among the S-level awakeners, Luo Ziyuan is among the best. After a slight adjustment, everyone set out on the journey again. During the period, they naturally encountered many zombie monsters, but before they had a few encounters, they were solved by Luo Ziyuan and his companions swinging the heavy sword in a few moves. Luo Ziyuan's chest, abdomen, and shoulders were wrapped in circles of bandages, and gradually his strength fell into decline, and he was led by another strong man. Mu Qiu casually threw a healing light ball towards Luo Ziyuan. The soft healing light hit Luo Ziyuan, like a sweet rain from heaven, and his body and mind felt clear. The latter's face immediately showed a comfortable expression, and he looked at Mu Qiu with gratitude. Mu Qiu nodded, and a gleam of light flashed in his eyes. He sensed a special energy from the mark on Luo Ziyuan's body. Some of it looked like soul power, but it was covered by another layer of soul energy. Mu Qiu thought this was the means by which the rebels covered their tracks. Along the way, Luo Ziyuan's companions stared at the unexpected situations that might occur at any time around them with tense expressions. On the contrary, the young boy with messy hair was quite curious about Mu Qiu and the others, and asked, "Brother Qiu, what was the Dongshan base where you were before like?" Mu Qiu looked up at the distant sky and smiled. "It's a very backward and remote base town, with few humans and scarce resources. It's normal to be lost in the tide of history if you can't keep up with the progress of the times." Mu Qiu narrowed his eyes and smiled at the messy-haired boy. "I am very interested in Zilan Base, a high-tech base at the forefront of mankind." During the conversation, Mu Qiu also learned that the boy's name was Mao Yuming, and this time he was going out with Luo Ziyuan for training. When mentioning Zilan Base, Mao Yuming's face became a little disappointed. "Our base was still very good before, and everyone believed that Zilan Base would become the last hope for saving the human race. But I don't know since when, the base has completely changed. Everyone began to compete for power and seek pleasure. The awakened ones with strong strength and talent became the dominant ones in the base, and ordinary people without superpowers became the oppressed party." Mao Yuming suddenly looked at Mu Qiu. "By the way, Brother Qiu, the uncle asked me to give this to you before." The uncle in Mao Yuming's mouth was naturally Luo Ziyuan. The messy-haired teenager took out a tube of reagent from his waist pocket, and light green liquid rolled in it. Mu Qiu took the reagent, and he was inexplicably familiar with it. This is a human enhancement agent developed by our base. It can stimulate the potential of the human body and strengthen the physique to a certain extent. Many ordinary people in our resistance army have greatly increased their physical fitness after injecting this injection of the agent. Uncle said that Brother Chu is an awakener of the healing system, and your physical strength is your weakness, so he specially asked me to give it to you. Mu Chu looked at the tube of light green potion and suddenly remembered where he had seen this potion before. Didn't Ji Yufeng often inject this potion, and then his strength increased greatly? But Mu Chu remembered that after Ji Yufeng injected the potion, his physical strength was enhanced, and it also brought a huge burden to his body, causing organ failure and aging, and huge side effects. Mu Chu said in a teasing tone, "Will this potion have no side effects?" Mao Yuming shook his head repeatedly. The previous potion did bring irreversible side effects to the body while stimulating the body's potential. However, although the newly developed potion is not as effective as before, it does not burden the body. Brother Chu, you can use it with confidence. Mu Chu stared at the improved potion in his hand, and then thought of the black iron box held by several people, and couldn't help but smile bitterly. That black iron box is obviously also an upgraded version of the space storage group. After a long time, the strengthening potion that Ji Yufeng risked his life for was a defective product retired from the base. I didn't expect that the Zilan base was so humble. The defective products after the experiment were used as trading items to exchange for materials with other bases. Other human bases, on the contrary, used the discarded products left by the Zilan base as precious treasures. The various actions of the Zilan base's high-level officials really made Mu Chu sigh. After walking for a while, the outline of the city ruins behind them finally faded away. Luo Ziyuan looked at several companions behind him and nodded slowly. Receiving Luo Ziyuan's eye signal, a strong man came forward and took out several black iron boxes from his arms. He untied a string of rings tied together at his waist and opened these black iron boxes one by one. A flash of light passed, and several cool motorcycles floating in the air appeared in front of everyone. Oh! Mu Chu looked at the cool modified motorcycles in front of him with interest.